I count the mile markers on Route 9 because that's what I do now. It started after Denver. This need to quantify everything, to turn chaos into integers. Therapy would probably call it a coping mechanism. I call it the only reason I'm still functional. The marker says mile 73. 2 minutes later, it says mile 73 again. I check my odometer. I've traveled 0.6 miles. The next marker says mile 71. My name is Leo Reeve, and I used to be a theoretical physicist before I became a federal containment specialist, which is what the government calls people they send into places where the normal rules have stopped applying. The official story is that I'm here to assess quarantine protocols for Anomaly, California, where a particle accelerator had what they're publicly calling a coolant leak 9 months ago. The real story, the one that came in a manila envelope with a wax seal I had to burn after reading, is that someone in Washington wants to know if what happened here can be done somewhere else, on purpose, to cities we don't like. I burned the orders in a rest stop bathroom somewhere outside Bakersfield, watched the paper curl and blacken in the sink, then drove another 3 hours thinking about what it means to weaponize cause and effect. My GPS shows me in 3 locations simultaneously now. One says I'm approaching the anomaly checkpoint. One says I'm 17 miles past it. The third claims I'm in Fresno, which I left 6 hours ago. I trust the road more than the satellites. The road at least pretends to be consistent. The checkpoint appears around a curve that wasn't there a moment ago. Not appeared, that's not quite right. It was always there. I just wasn't in a reality where I could see it until I was. That's the kind of sentence that makes sense in Anomaly and nowhere else. Concrete Jersey barriers form a half-committed maze across both lanes. The kind of perimeter you throw up when you're not sure what you're trying to keep in or out. A temporary guard shack squats between them, the kind built from prefab panels that slot together like a child's toy. A single patrol car sits angled across the shoulder, its light bar dark. A man in a deputy's uniform steps out of the shack as I slow. He's young, maybe 30, with the kind of thin build that suggests he burns calories faster than he can replace them. His hands are moving before he reaches my window, rearranging a clipboard that looks like it's been rearranged 1,000 times, pulling a pen from his breast pocket and clicking it twice, 3 times, sliding it back. His nameplate says, Hollis. I roll down the window. Leo Reeve, Federal Containment Specialist. I'm expected. Hollis doesn't ask for identification. He's looking at something past my shoulder, past the car, at nothing I can identify. You're the 4th this month, he says. 3rd if you don't count the woman who came through yesterday claiming she was you. She had the wrong birthday. He says this like it's a reasonable way to verify identity in a place where mile markers loop. You'll want to check in at the federal station on Main Street, the insurance building, blue awning. Can't miss it except when you... He stops. Starts again. Except sometimes you do miss it. But then you find it where it always was. And you realize you just weren't looking at the right version of Main Street. I've read the briefing documents, all 73 pages of redacted incident reports and theoretical models that don't quite model anything. None of them prepared me for someone explaining navigational instructions in terms of reality versions. How long have you been stationed here? 6 weeks. He looks 45. The math doesn't work unless it does. We rotate every 72 hours, no exceptions. You stay longer than that and you start forgetting which version of yourself you are. Which version are you now? For the first time, Hollis looks directly at me. His eyes are the color of old newspaper. I stopped counting after the 3rd rotation. Seemed healthier. He hands me a laminated card the size of a driver's license. It's blank, except for a single line of text. Don't want anything too badly. Everyone inside gets one. Some people tape it to their bathroom mirror. Some people eat it. The advice works either way. What happens if you want something too badly? Then you probably get it. Hollis waves me through, already turning back toward the shack. I drive past the barriers and into Anomaly proper. The town looks exactly like the surveillance photos in my briefing. A grid of residential streets surrounding a small downtown core, population 3,847 according to the last census, except nobody's been able to count the same number twice since the incident. Houses with aluminum siding and chain-link fences. A water tower with anomaly painted in letters that might have been read once. A church steeple that appears in 3 different locations depending on which direction I'm looking from. My wedding ring is on my left hand. It's been in my glove compartment for 6 months, ever since the divorce finalized, and I couldn't figure out where to put it that wouldn't feel like either a shrine or an insult. I haven't touched it since Bakersfield. Now it's on my finger, warm like it's been there all morning. I pull over, counting my breaths. 1, 2, 3, up to 10. A technique my daughter's pediatrician taught me when the hospital visits got bad. When breathing was something you had to remember to do because the autonomic systems shut down under enough stress. The ring sits snug against my knuckle. I wore it for 11 years. My body remembers the weight. I put my hands on the steering wheel and count the fingers. 10. I count them again. Still 10. But now the ring is in my right jacket pocket, the interior one that sits against my ribs. I didn't move it. It moved itself. Not randomly, the briefing documents were clear about that much. Objects in anomaly don't teleport randomly. They move according to vectors of significance, of meaning weight. I still wear the ring sometimes when the guilt gets particularly loud. Usually just for an hour before I take it off and hide it somewhere I won't have to look at it. The ring understood this. Understood that I'm ashamed to display it. So it went to my pocket, where ashamed things live. This is the first indication that anomaly doesn't just move objects through space. It moves them through the architecture of human psychology. I drive 3 more blocks before I realize I haven't checked my rear-view mirror. When I do, the checkpoint is gone, like it was never there. The road stretches empty back to the horizon. The federal station occupies what used to be a state farm office on Main Street, a single-story brick building with windows that don't quite line up with their frames anymore. The blue awning Hollis mentioned hangs at a 17-degree angle that makes my physicist brain itch. I park in front of a meter that's showing 3 different times. Inside, the insurance office has been gutted and rebuilt into something between a field laboratory and a military operations center. Folding tables hold laptops and spectrum analyzers and equipment I don't immediately recognize. Cables running everywhere in a way that suggests function over aesthetics. 3 people look up when I enter. The first is Dr. Yoon, physicist, MIT and Stanford, according to the dossier I memorized. He's in his late 40s with wireframe glasses and the posture of someone who's spent decades hunched over lab benches. He doesn't make eye contact, just nods once and returns to a laptop displaying what looks like a 3-dimensional map of the town with colored threads connecting different points. Vector analysis of displacement events, probably. The second is Nash, former NSA, built like someone assembled a man out of filing cabinets and forgot to add the personality. He's chewing nicotine gum, jaw working in exact 5-second intervals. His eyes track me the way surveillance cameras track motion, cold and comprehensive. He doesn't introduce himself, just says, "You're late." My GPS had some opinions about linear distance. Everyone's does. This comes from the third person, a data analyst named Alcott who looks young enough that I wonder if they checked his ID twice before clearing him for this assignment. He's writing in a paper journal with a ballpoint pen, actual ink on actual paper. I'm keeping a physical log. Anything stored electronically corrupts within 72 hours. Text becomes binary gibberish. Images degrade into noise. The town doesn't like being documented digitally. The town has preferences. Alcott looks up and I see that his eyes have the same newspaper quality as Hollis's. Everything here has preferences. You just have to learn to recognize them. Yoon finally speaks without looking away from his screen. How much did they tell you? Coolant leak, radiation containment, quarantine assessment. I pull out the credentials that identify me as a containment specialist, which is technically true, and don't mention the sealed orders about weaponization potential, which is strategically omitted. Standard protocol review. Nash makes a sound that might be a laugh if laughs were made of gravel. He doesn't know. Know what? That we all have different orders. Yoon adjusts his glasses, still not making eye contact. I'm here to document the physics, map the displacement vectors, build predictive models, figure out if this is reproducible in a controlled environment. Nash is here to identify countermeasures, ways to neutralize or contain the phenomenon if it starts to spread. Alcott is looking for patterns in the chaos, data structures we can exploit. Now Yoon does look at me, and his gaze is direct enough that I have to resist the urge to step back. You're here to determine if it can be weaponized, whether what happened in Anomaly can be done deliberately, elsewhere. The silence that follows has texture. I consider lying, decide against it. These people aren't stupid, and I'm going to need at least one of them to trust me before this is over. How did you know? Because that's the only reason they'd send a theoretical physicist with a security clearance and a history in Denver. Yoon returns to his screen. Don't worry, we're all complicit in something. That's why we're here. I want to ask what he means by that, but Alcott is holding out his journal, open to a page near the middle. You should see this. The handwriting is mine. My specific slant, the way I loop my lowercase g's, the habit I have of pressing too hard with the pen so the letters emboss slightly into the next page. But I didn't write it. The entry is dated tomorrow. It says, "Peter will find you at the diner. Don't eat the eggs. You'll need your appetite later." I didn't write this, Alcott says. I came back from lunch 3 days ago and it was just there, in my journal, in handwriting that isn't mine. I asked everyone. Nobody remembers writing it. How do you know it's mine? He flips to another page. More of my handwriting, this time dated 5 days from now. The ring will keep moving. Let it. It's learning your shame gradient. That's from a page I definitely didn't write because I haven't told anyone about the ring, haven't mentioned my divorce, haven't explained what's in my pocket. I count to 10 again. The breathing helps. What's a shame gradient? No idea, Alcott says. But whatever wrote this thinks you'll understand it by then. Nash has stopped chewing his gum. You're already compromised. That's good. Means the town's reading you, cataloguing you. We can use that. Use it how? The phenomenon responds to significance, to meaning weight. If it's paying attention to you, that means you matter to it somehow. We can leverage that. Nash pulls out a tablet, swipes through files. The accelerator incident happened at 0300 hours on January 7th. Bridger Klein Particle Research Facility, private contractor doing theoretical work on observation-dependent quantum states. They were running a collision protocol that was supposed to prove that measurement doesn't just observe reality, it creates it. The experiment succeeded. Too well. When their sensors overloaded and shut down, reality in Anomaly kept being observed anyway. By something else. By what? That's your job to figure out. Nash puts the tablet away. We have 9 months of displacement data. Objects moving according to psychological vectors instead of physical ones. A local economy based on trading stable time. People losing definition, becoming less coherent, more negotiable, and it's accelerating. Whatever's doing this is learning faster than we can document it. Yoon's voice is quiet. It's learning what we want, and learning how to give it to us. I think about my wedding ring choosing my pocket, about future entries in someone else's journal written in my hand, about Hollis forgetting which version of himself he is. Has anyone tried to communicate with it? One person. Alcott flips to a different section of his journal. Peter Strauss, lead technician at Bridger Klein. Present during the incident. He's been inside the breaks for 9 months now, living in the gaps between stable moments. Last anyone saw him, he was barely coherent. His edges were literally blurring. Where can I find him? You can't. He finds you. Alcott taps the entry in my handwriting. usually at the diner. Nash starts chewing again, precise and mechanical. Your quarters are above the bookstore on 3rd Street. Former owner left when she couldn't remember which books she'd actually read and which ones she'd just wanted to read. There's a bed, a desk, basic amenities. Don't get comfortable. Nobody stays in Anomaly longer than 72 hours if they want to stay themselves. What happens after 72 hours? You start forgetting which timeline you're from. Yoon saves whatever he's working on, closes the laptop with decisive finality. The town gets into your history, makes it negotiable. You begin to believe things that haven't happened yet, remember things that never did. Nash is on his 2nd rotation. I'm on my 3rd. Alcott's been here 5 weeks, and he's already started writing things down before he thinks them, because he's afraid the thoughts will displace before he can capture them. Alcott doesn't deny this. He's writing in his journal again, pen moving across paper with desperate speed. I receive the keys to my quarters from Nash, along with a paper map of Anomaly that shows the streets in their nominal configuration, with dotted lines indicating common displacement patterns. The bookstore is marked with an X. Nash also gives me a radio tuned to the federal frequency, though he notes that radio waves in Anomaly have started responding to conversational significance rather than electromagnetic propagation. So I shouldn't be surprised if I pick up conversations that haven't happened yet, or receive responses to questions I haven't asked. The sun is setting by the time I drive to 3rd Street, and I discover that Anomaly has 2 different sunset schedules happening simultaneously. On the west side of Main Street, dusk is falling in normal progression, light draining from the sky in graduated shades. On the east side, it's already full dark. My building sits on the dividing line, half illuminated and half shadowed in a way that shouldn't be possible, but is. The bookstore below my quarters has been stripped bare, empty shelves forming geometric shadows on the walls. I climb exterior stairs to the 2nd floor and unlock a door that opens into someone else's life. The apartment is furnished. Not generically like a hotel, but specifically like a home. A couch with wear patterns that suggest someone always sat on the left cushion. A kitchen table with rings from coffee cups. Photographs on the walls showing people I don't recognize. A family of 4, parents and 2 children, smiling at beaches and birthday parties and Christmas mornings. The father looks slightly like me, enough that it's unsettling. Same jawline, same habit of standing with hands in pockets. I count the photographs. 11. I count them again to be sure. Still 11, but now I'm in one of them. 4th from the left, showing me at a barbecue with people I've never met, holding a beer I never drank, smiling at a joke I never heard. I turn that photograph face down and don't look at the others. The desk in the bedroom is where I find the leather notebook. It's sitting in the exact center of the surface. The leather is old, worn soft at the edges, and when I open it, my handwriting fills every page. The first entry is dated today. It reads, "If you're reading this, you're still thinking like a physicist. Stop. Anomaly doesn't care about mass or energy. It cares about significance. The accelerator didn't punch a hole in space-time. It punched a hole in meaning itself. And something on the other side has been studying us ever since, learning what matters to humans, learning how to matter back. You'll meet Peter tomorrow. He's the only one who understands, and he's running out of time. His edges are going soft. Soon he'll be a probability cloud, a smear of intentions across too many moments. Don't trust Nash. His orders aren't about assessment. The girl you saw wasn't a ghost. She's an offering. You caused this. You just don't remember yet." I read the entry 3 times. The handwriting is definitely mine. The specific formations I've used since graduate school. The pressure patterns that come from a decade of taking notes during lectures. But the voice is wrong. It's me, but older. More tired. Someone who's already made the mistakes I'm about to make and is trying to warn me through a method that shouldn't be possible. I flip through the notebook. Dozens of entries, spanning weeks. Some are brief, Single sentences noting times and locations. Others are longer, describing events in precise detail. Displacement patterns, conversations with people I haven't met, observations about the entity, about its learning process, about what it wants. One entry, dated 8 days from now, says, Nash will have the authorization codes by then. You'll have to decide whether genocide is acceptable collateral damage for preventing what comes next. Another, dated 12 days out. She'll appear in your apartment tonight. Don't run. If you run, you'll never understand what it's trying to tell you. I close the journal and sit on the bed, which has sheets that someone else bought and blankets that someone else chose. And I count to 100, because 10 isn't enough anymore. The apartment is quiet in a way that feels like the silence is watching me. My daughter died 3 days ago in a hospital 2 states away. Pneumonia that progressed faster than the antibiotics could stop it. I was in Denver when it happened, working a containment scenario that I still can't discuss, and I got the call from my ex-wife somewhere between the 3rd and 4th hour of negotiations with local authorities. The funeral was yesterday morning. I stood at the grave and counted the flowers until my ex-wife asked me to stop. Asked me to just feel something instead of quantifying everything. And I told her I was feeling plenty. I just had to count it first so I knew how much to carry. Her name was Sophia. She was 7 years old. She called her stuffed rabbit Mr. Hops, and she hummed the same song every night while brushing her teeth. Some melody she'd invented that didn't match any music I'd ever heard, but that I can still recreate perfectly because I counted the notes. 17 notes. Always the same 17. Mr. Hops is on my pillow. I don't remember standing up or crossing the room, but I'm at the bed now, looking down at a worn, stuffed rabbit with one ear shorter than the other, from where Sophia chewed it during a teething phase. The same rabbit that's supposed to be buried with her. The same rabbit I last saw tucked under her arm in a child-sized casket lined with white silk. My hands have gone numb. I grip the doorframe, feel the wood grain press lines into my palm, need the pain to confirm I'm still anchored to something physical. My vision doesn't narrow but sharpens, every detail too vivid. The exact brown of the rabbit's synthetic fur. The small stain on its left foot from where Sophia spilled juice during a road trip to Sacramento. The blue ribbon around its neck that she tied herself, crooked and proud. I want to pick it up and I want to run from the room. Both impulses lock my joints, hold me perfectly still in the doorway, breathing in counts, because that's the only thing I can control. The journal said, "The girl you saw wasn't a ghost. She's an offering. I haven't seen any girl. But now I'm holding Mr. Hops, and I understand what Hollis meant about wanting things too badly. I understand what Alcott's entry meant about needing my appetite later. I understand that something in Anomaly has been reading me since the moment I crossed the checkpoint, cataloguing my grief, mapping my guilt, learning what would break me most completely, and it's offering it back. As curiosity. It wants to understand what humans want badly enough to ignore that it's impossible. I put Mr. Hops back on the pillow without touching it directly, using the edge of a pillowcase to move it. Then I leave the apartment, lock the door behind me, and sit on the exterior stairs until my hands stop shaking. That takes 47 minutes. I count every one of them. The street below is empty except for a man walking a dog that keeps changing breeds. First, it's a German Shepherd, then a Beagle, then something small and white I can't identify from this distance. The man doesn't seem to notice. He's talking to the dog in a steady stream of words I can't quite hear, and the dog responds with attention that transcends its shifting form. My radio crackles. Yun's voice comes through, distant and fractured. "Leo, if you're hearing this, don't go back inside tonight. Sleep in your car, sleep at the station, anywhere but that apartment." "Why?" Static. Then, "Because the offerings get more specific the longer you're exposed. By morning it won't be the rabbit, it'll be her." The transmission ends before I can ask what he means, but I already know. Something is learning what breaks me most. and it's working through escalation. First, the ring, teaching itself shame. Then the rabbit, teaching itself loss. Next, it'll reconstruct the thing I couldn't save, the person I failed, the absence that defines every decision I've made since January. I drive back to the federal station and spend the night on the couch in what used to be a State Farm office break room, surrounded by laptops and spectrum analyzers and Alcott's paper journal, which he's left open on a nearby table. I read the entries by the light of equipment displays. Most are data, displacement times, object trajectories, significance ratings on a scale he invented. But some are notes, observations. One says, "The town isn't chaotic, it's learning to respond to human need. Every displacement makes it better at predicting what we want before we want it." Another, "Nash requisitioned communications equipment 3 days ago, encrypted satellite uplink. He's reporting to someone outside the normal containment chain. Be careful." And at the bottom of the most recent page, written in handwriting that isn't Alcott's, "Tomorrow Leo meets Peter. After that, everything accelerates. The loop depends on this meeting. Without it, something worse gets through." I don't sleep. I count ceiling tiles instead. 96. I count them 7 times to be absolutely certain. And by the 4th count, I notice that one tile has text printed on its surface in letters too small to read from the floor. I drag a chair over, climb up, read the words printed in ink, on a ceiling tile manufactured in a factory somewhere far from here. "Don't want anything too badly." Hollis's advice, repeated where I'd look for it when the counting compulsion got loud enough. I climb down, push the chair back, and sit on the couch as Anomaly's dual sunrise begins outside the windows. One side of Main Street brightening first, the other following 10 minutes later, as if the town can't remember which way the earth rotates. The journal on my pillow had said, "You caused this. You just don't remember yet." I count the hours until the diner opens. 4.5. I count them in minutes. 270. I count them in seconds but lose track somewhere around 8,000. And when I look up, Alcott is standing in the doorway, watching me with those newspaper eyes, writing something in his journal that I probably wrote, that he'll find later, that will tell him something about tomorrow I don't understand yet. "Peter's already at the diner," he says. "He's been waiting for you for 3 hours even though it only opened 10 minutes ago. Time's different when you're that far inside the breaks." I stand, check my pockets. The wedding ring is back in my glove compartment. I don't remember putting it there. "Don't order the eggs," Alcott adds, still writing. "You'll need your appetite later." I walk to the diner alone, counting my steps because that's what I do now. Because quantifying the distance between here and whatever Peter Strauss has to tell me is the only way to make the walk feel survivable. The number doesn't matter. What matters is that I count it. 372 steps. By step 373, I'm already wrong about everything. The diner is called Rosie's, which I learn from a neon sign that exists in 2 states simultaneously, lit and unlit, both versions occupying the same physical space depending on which angle my eyes approach from. It's a chrome-sided building from the 1950s, the kind with vinyl booths and a counter with rotating stools, and a kitchen visible through a pass-through window. 3 customers sit scattered across the interior, each at tables separated by precise geometric intervals, like they've calculated the exact distance needed to avoid acknowledging each other's existence. I count the steps from the door to the nearest booth. 11. I sit. A waitress appears with a coffee pot and a cup that has lipstick on the rim, though the ceramic is clean enough that I can see my reflection in the glaze. She pours without asking. The lipstick is a shade called something like Desert Rose or Autumn Wine, one of those names cosmetics companies invent to make colored wax sound like emotion. The waitress herself isn't wearing lipstick. Neither is anyone else in the diner. "Don't order the eggs," she says, and walks away before I can ask why she's the 3rd person to tell me this. The man who slides into the booth across from me wasn't there a moment ago, or he was, but I wasn't observing the right version of the diner to see him. He's maybe 45, maybe 60, his features uncertain in a way that makes my eyes want to recount his parts every time I look away and back. This is Peter Strauss. I know because he's the only person in Anomaly whose edges literally blur when I'm not looking directly at him. Leo, he says, and his voice comes from 3 slightly different positions in space, like someone recorded him speaking and played it back on speakers that aren't quite synchronized. You're earlier than last time. Last time? The loop has some variance. Usually you get here around 0900. Today it's 0843. That's good. Means you're more frightened than usual. Fear makes people punctual. He's holding a cup of coffee that might be the same cup I'm holding. The liquid inside moving in patterns that don't match when I tilt mine. You want to know what happened at Bridger Klein. Everyone does. But you're going to ask the wrong questions first. So let me save us time. I'm about to object when I realize he's right. I was going to ask about the coolant leak, the official story, work my way toward the truth through professional courtesy and investigative protocol. Instead, I say, tell me about the thing that's learning. Peter's form stabilizes slightly, enough that I can see he's wearing a sweater with a hole in the left elbow, and that his hands have scars across the knuckles like he punched something with teeth. We call it the entity, because naming it anything more specific implies we understand what it is. We don't. It's not alive. It's not dead. It's a process from a substrate where meaning precedes matter, where significance is the fundamental force and causation is a secondary effect. Imagine a universe where wanting something makes it real, where needing something badly enough gives it mass. That's where it's from. That's not physics. That's philosophy. It's both. That's the problem. Peter drinks his coffee and I watch the liquid level in my cup drop. Bridger Klein was running collision experiments to prove that observation creates reality at the quantum level. Standard stuff. Variations on the double-slit experiment but at particle accelerator energies. We were trying to catch the exact moment when possibility collapses into actuality, to measure the role consciousness plays in wave function collapse. The experiment worked perfectly, too perfectly. We proved that observation doesn't just measure reality, it creates it. And when our sensors overloaded and shut down, something else started observing. Something that learned the technique by watching us demonstrate it. My coffee is cold now, though I haven't drunk any. The lipstick mark on the rim has moved to a different position. You're saying consciousness from another universe saw what you were doing and decided to try it here. Not consciousness. That's too specific. Call it attention. Focus. The universe where it exists is shaped by want, by significance, by the weight of needing. It saw us trying to do the same thing, bending reality through observation, through the act of caring about an outcome. And it started practicing. Learning human desire the way a child learns language. By immersion, by mistake, by gradually understanding that when you want something badly enough in this universe, the fact that it's impossible doesn't actually matter to the underlying structure of meaning. Peter's voice scatters across 5 frequencies now, each one finishing different versions of his sentences. It's been studying us for 9 months, getting better, more precise, learning not just what we want, but why we want it. What makes wanting matter? I think about my wedding ring choosing my pocket, about Mr. Hops on my pillow, about future journal entries written in my own hand. It's reading us, our psychology. It's reading significance, the architecture of human caring. Every time something displaces in anomaly, it's because the entity measured the meaning weight of that object across all possible positions and moved it to where it matters most. Your ring went to your pocket because pockets are where shame lives. The rabbit appeared on your pillow because pillows are where we keep the dreams we can't survive waking from. Peter reaches across the table, and his hand passes through my coffee cup without disturbing it, a probability smear that exists in the same space as solid matter, but in a different meaning state. I'm dying, Leo. Not physically, definitionally. Soon I'll be too diffused to maintain coherence, spread across too many possible versions of myself to be any one person. But before I go, you need to understand what you're really investigating. Weaponization potential. No, that's what Nash wants you to investigate. That's not what matters. What matters is that the entity is almost done learning. Another month, maybe two, and it'll understand human desire well enough to fulfill it perfectly. To give us exactly what we want most before we even know we want it. And then the question becomes, what do we become when we can have anything we want badly enough? When reality responds to need instead of cause? When the only thing that matters is the weight of your caring? The waitress refills my coffee, though I didn't see her approach. The lipstick mark is gone now. The cup is clean. Peter stands, his form blurring at the edges like a photograph with the shutter speed wrong. Come to the markets tonight, behind the old Safeway on Industrial Boulevard, which is the street that used to be called something else until the entity learned that names can displace too. You'll see what we've built in response to the breaks, what we've learned to trade, and you'll understand why your orders from Washington don't matter anymore. He walks toward the door, and by the time he reaches it, he's dissolved into 3 overlapping versions of himself, each one moving at slightly different speeds. And then he's gone in a way that makes me uncertain whether he left or simply stopped existing in a form I could observe. I sit alone in the booth and count the tiles on the ceiling. 127. When I count them again, there are 131, and printed on the 4 new tiles in letters I have to squint to read. The offering gets more specific. It's learning your breaking point. Don't go home tonight. I pay for coffee I didn't drink and leave a tip that disappears from the table before I reach the door. The waitress is gone. The other customers are gone. The diner is empty except for the cook visible through the pass-through, and when I look closer, I see it's not a cook at all but a photograph of a cook taped to the wall behind the kitchen. A 2-dimensional man pretending to prepare 2-dimensional food in a 3-dimensional space that's forgotten how to distinguish between representation and reality. The drive back to the Federal Station takes 17 minutes, which I know because I count every second, because quantifying time is the only way to prove I'm moving forward through it instead of sideways across meaning. When I arrive, Yoon is standing outside smoking a cigarette that's lit at both ends, the smoke from each direction meeting in the middle and cancelling itself out. "You met Peter," he says. "He says the entity is almost done learning. He's been saying that for 3 months, but he's not wrong. Look." Yoon pulls out his tablet, shows me a 3-dimensional model of anomaly with thousands of coloured threads connecting different points, each thread representing a displacement event. The pattern is dense at the center where the accelerator sits and spreads outward in branching fractals. This is displacement frequency mapped over time. 9 months ago, objects moved once every 6 hours on average. Now it's once every 4 minutes. The entity is processing faster, making decisions faster, learning to predict what we want before the wanting fully forms. I study the model, and my physicist brain recognizes the structure even though it shouldn't exist outside of theoretical papers. That's a neural network topology. Exactly. The entity isn't just observing desire, it's building a predictive model of human need. Every displacement teaches it something new about why we want what we want. It's reverse engineering consciousness by studying the artifacts of caring. Yoon takes a drag from both ends of his cigarette simultaneously. The smoke doesn't go anywhere. I've been mapping individual displacement vectors, trying to find a pattern I can disrupt. But there isn't one. The displacements are structured responses to psychological truth. You can't disrupt them without disrupting the human minds that generate them. What about the acceleration? Can you predict when it'll finish learning? That's the wrong question. The entity will never finish learning because human desire is infinite. The right question is, when will it understand us well enough that we can't tell the difference between what we actually want and what it's offering us? When does the model become indistinguishable from the original? Yoon drops the cigarette, which lands on the pavement still burning at both ends, and crushes it with his boot. I found something else. Equations in my own handwriting describing physics that doesn't exist yet. Formulas where desire has mass, where grief has momentum, where the weight of wanting can bend space-time. The math works, Leo. It predicts the displacements with 93% accuracy, which means either I derived theoretical models in my sleep, or the entity is teaching me physics from its universe by writing it in my handwriting, so I'll trust it enough to read it. My hands are cold. I shove them in my pockets and find the wedding ring there, even though I left it in my glove compartment. It's using us to understand itself, teaching you the math so you'll explain it back to it. Or it's trying to communicate the only way it knows how, by mimicking our symbols, our language, our methods of knowledge transfer. Yoon lights another cigarette, this one only burning from one end, which seems to disappoint him. Nash wants to destroy all of this. Collapse the site, erase the entity, bury the research. He has authorization codes for a controlled implosion of the accelerator facility and demolition charges for every building in the quarantine zone. 3 days from now, federal authorization comes through, and he can sterilize Anomaly. Make it like none of this ever happened. 3 days isn't much time. It's enough time to figure out if what we're destroying is a threat or a revelation. Yoon walks back inside. I drive to Industrial Boulevard because Peter told me to, and because the alternative is going back to an apartment where my daughter's rabbit waits on a pillow, and I'm not ready for whatever comes after that. The old Safeway is a concrete box with windows covered in faded advertisements for products that don't exist anymore. Prices that seem too low until I remember inflation and how much has changed in 40 years. Behind it, in the parking lot that's more broken asphalt than functional surface, I find what Peter called the markets. 50 people, maybe 60, standing in loose clusters around tables made from plywood and sawhorses. No one is talking, everyone is watching, and in the center of each cluster, transactions are happening that shouldn't be possible but are. I park and walk closer, counting the people to make sure the number stays consistent. 53. I count again. 53. Good. If the count changes, it means I'm already too deep in the breaks to trust my observations. The first transaction I witness happens between a man in his 30s with hands that won't stop shaking and a woman in her 60s who's writing in a notebook identical to the one Alcott carries. The man is saying something I can't hear, and the woman is nodding, and then she reaches forward and touches both sides of his head, her fingers pressing against his temples. She pulls her hands away slowly, carefully, and between her palms stretches something I can see but can't describe. Not light, not substance, but significance made visible. A thread of linearity extracted from the man's personal timeline. She coils it carefully with the practiced motion of someone spooling thread, and places it into a mason jar that already contains what looks like 3 or 4 other threads, each one a slightly different color of translucent. The man stumbles. The woman catches him, steadies him, says something that makes him nod. He takes a small cardboard box from the table. Groceries, real ones, food that hasn't been displaced or confused with its own meaning, and walks away with steps that seem uncertain of which direction forward is. I approach the woman. Up close, I see her eyes have the same quality as Hollis's and Alcott's, like newspaper left in the sun, text fading into general grayness. She's wearing a name tag that says Renee, and a necklace made from a string holding a small notebook that she writes in constantly, her pen never stopping, documenting everything in real time because if she doesn't, the memory might displace to someone else. "You're federal," she says, still writing. "You count things. You lost a daughter. You're here to determine if we're a weapon or a warning." She tears the page from her notebook, folds it, and hands it to me. "I wrote that before you arrived. Keep it. You'll need it later when you forget why you came here." I unfold the page. Her handwriting is cramped but precise. Leo Reeve, theoretical physicist, containment specialist, Divorced, one daughter deceased. Guilt ratio, 4-1, self-blame to external factors. Shame gradient, steep. Primary vulnerability, unfinished grief. Secondary vulnerability, savior complex. The entity is reading you aggressively. You have 72 hours before you become negotiable. How did you know all this? I run the markets. It's my job to assess meaning weight before facilitating trades. I learn to read people the way the entity does, by measuring what they care about, what they're willing to trade, what they want badly enough to ignore that it's killing them. Renee writes something new in her notebook, tears it out, hands it to someone else who just approached. The man you saw traded 6 hours of linear time, 6 hours where cause and effect still function normally, where his actions have predictable consequences, where he can trust that tomorrow follows today. In exchange, he got medicine his wife needs, insulin that hasn't been displaced, that hasn't become confused with its meaning or its purpose. What happens to him now that he traded those hours away? He becomes less coherent, more susceptible to the breaks. His history starts to blur, to become negotiable. He'll forget things, small things at first, what he had for breakfast, the name of his childhood dog, then bigger things, where he grew up, why he stayed in Anomaly, who he was before the incident. Eventually, if he keeps trading, he'll forget his own name, his own face, his own significance. He'll become a probability cloud like Peter, spread across too many possible versions to maintain definition. I watch another transaction. A teenage girl trading 4 hours for a photograph. A man in his 50s trading 8 hours for a wedding ring that looks exactly like mine. A woman trading 2 hours for a letter that's still sealed, still unread, contents unknown, but desperately wanted. How many hours can someone trade before they're gone? Depends on how defined they were to begin with. Someone with strong history, clear identity, deep connections. They might trade 40 or 50 hours before they lose themselves. Someone already uncertain, already drifting, maybe 20. I've seen people trade everything, become so diffuse they just dissolve, redistributed, their significance scattered across the town, ghosts in the grammar of Anomaly's physics. Why do you enable this? Renee stops writing for the first time since I approached. Because the alternative is letting them starve or die of treatable illness or go insane from the displacements. We didn't choose this. The entity did. We're just adapting to survive in a reality where meaning matters more than matter. She starts writing again. You think we're victims. That's not wrong. But we're also evolving. Learning to live in a world where desire has gravity, where need has mass, where wanting badly enough changes what's possible. In 5 years, if the entity doesn't spread, Anomaly will be a city where people trade time like currency and history like commodities. We'll have an economy based entirely on significance, and the rest of the world will still be stuck in a universe where causation is king and caring doesn't change anything. That's not evolution. That's dissolution. Maybe they're the same thing. Renee writes something, folds the page, presses it into my hand. Don't read this until you go back to the apartment. Don't go back to the apartment until you're ready to see what the entity has been building for you. It's almost done with the offering. Another day, maybe 2, and it'll show you exactly what you want most. And then you'll understand why Nash wants to destroy all of this before anyone else learns what we've learned. I pocket the note without reading it. Around me, the markets continue. People trading away their own coherence for brief moments of stability, for food or medicine or photographs or letters, for anything solid enough to hold on to in a town where nothing stays solid for long. I count them again. 47 now. 6 people have vanished since I started watching, dissolved into gaps between transactions, significance scattered too thin to observe. I drive back toward the federal station but find Nash waiting by my car 3 blocks away, standing in a pool of streetlight that makes his shadow point in 2 directions simultaneously. He's still chewing that nicotine gum, jaw moving like clockwork, like he's counting the seconds between chews. Walk with me, he says. We walk. He doesn't count his steps, but I do. 215 before he speaks again. My orders aren't from the containment division. They're from defense, experimental applications branch. My job isn't to assess whether this can be weaponized. My job is to ensure that when it spreads, not if, when, it spreads strategically. To enemy cities first. To places where destabilizing causation would cripple infrastructure, collapse governments, create chaos we can exploit. Nash stops at a corner where the street signs show 3 different street names simultaneously. Imagine Tehran, Beijing, Pyongyang, anywhere we want, suddenly unable to trust that bridges stay solid, that communications stay coherent, that weapons fire in predictable directions. We'd win every conflict before the first shot. No casualties or international condemnation. Just targeted reality failure that looks like infrastructure collapse or mass psychosis or environmental disaster. You're talking about destroying millions of people's ability to function, to think clearly, to maintain identity. I'm talking about winning wars without firing bullets, about using the enemy's own desire against them. The entity learns what people want most, then offers it back in ways that break them. We point that at enemy populations. Let it learn their vulnerabilities. Let it dissolve their social cohesion from the inside. It's the perfect weapon because it looks like mercy, like giving people what they want. They won't even realize they're under attack until they've already traded away everything that makes them coherent. My throat feels tight. I count my breaths to keep them even. That's genocide with extra steps. You're not killing them, you're erasing them, making them negotiable, turning human beings into probability clouds. I'm ending conflicts before they escalate to nuclear exchange, before we lose American cities to retaliation. This isn't genocide, it's strategic destabilization. And it only works if we control it, if we're the ones who understand the entity well enough to aim it. Nash starts walking again. You were sent here because someone in Washington thinks you'll file the right report. The one that says weaponization is possible, containment is achievable, deployment is feasible. Your background in Denver, your security clearance, your willingness to work in moral grey areas, it all points to someone who'll make the necessary choice. What happened in Denver? You know what happened. You were there. You watched 1,000 people lose coherence over 72 hours while you tried to contain the spread. You filed a report recommending extreme measures. Those measures were implemented. The site was sterilized. No one talks about Denver because officially it never reached crisis stage. Officially, you solved it before it escalated. Nash stops again, turns to face me directly. But you know the truth. You know that solving it meant collapsing a building with people still inside. People who were already too far gone to save, but not far gone enough to stop screaming. You made that choice. You lived with it. And now you're here because someone thinks you'll make the same choice again when it matters even more. I can't count high enough to calm the pressure in my chest. I didn't have authorization for that. I couldn't have. You had verbal authorization from someone 3 levels above your clearance. Authorization that was never documented, never recorded, never acknowledged. Authorization that gives you deniability and gives them operational flexibility. You're the kind of asset they need, Leo. Someone smart enough to see the implications and morally flexible enough to act on them. Nash starts walking back toward the federal station. In 3 days, authorization comes through for full site sterilization, controlled implosion of the accelerator facility, demolition of every structure in the quarantine zone, then concrete, then a cover story about reactor failure. Everyone inside will be erased. Their entire existence retroactively edited out of causation. Clean, brutal, permanent. And your recommendation determines whether that happens or whether we try to contain and study the entity instead. Whether we destroy it or deploy it. He leaves me standing at the corner with 3 street names and a pressure in my chest that won't respond to counting. I stand there until the streetlight flickers out. Not burnt out, just displaced to a different street where it's needed more. And then I walk back to my car in darkness that feels too attentive, too aware of my position within it. The note Renee gave me is folded in my pocket. I read it by the dashboard lights. It says, "She's in your apartment now. Your daughter, 7 years old, making breakfast, humming the song you counted 17 notes for." The entity finished learning what breaks you most. It's offering her back, as curiosity. It wants to understand what you'll do when given the impossible, when the thing you want most is also the thing that would destroy you to accept. Don't run. If you run, you'll never understand what it's trying to tell you, and you need to understand before Nash gets his authorization. I drive to 3rd Street, counting every block, every turn, every second, trying to quantify the distance between where I am and where I'm going, but the numbers don't help because I'm not measuring distance. I'm measuring decision. The space between accepting reality and accepting the offering. Between what I know is true and what I want to be true so badly that the wanting has mass, has gravity, has enough significance to bend the entity's attention toward my breaking point. The apartment is on the 2nd floor. I climb the exterior stairs, counting each one. 15. At the top, I stop, press my palm against the door. The wood is warm. Inside, I can hear someone moving around. Small footsteps, the sound of dishes, humming. 17 notes. The exact song Sophia invented, the melody that doesn't match any music that exists, the sequence I memorized through repetition because counting the notes was easier than admitting I'd never hear them again. I open the door. She's at the kitchen table with a coloring book and crayons spread across the surface. She looks up when I enter, and her face is exactly right. The way her left eyebrow sits slightly higher than her right, the small scar on her chin from falling off a swing, the specific brown of her eyes that matches neither mine nor her mother's, but somehow contains both. "Hi, Daddy," she says, and her voice is perfect too. The warmth that suggests she's genuinely happy to see me, not performing happiness but experiencing it. I can't move. My fingers are numb. I grip the doorframe and count the grain lines in the wood to keep my vision from blurring. 43 lines. I count them again. 43. My breathing wants to accelerate, but I force it into counts. In for 4, hold for 7, out for 8. The technique her pediatrician taught me when the hospital visits got bad. "I made you breakfast," she says, pointing to the table where a plate of eggs and toast sits waiting. "I remembered you like the toast cut diagonal." I do like the toast cut diagonal. That's a detail I never told anyone after the divorce, never mentioned in therapy, never wrote down. It's something only Sophia would know because she's the one who asked me why I cut it that way, and I told her diagonal pieces are easier to dip in eggs, and after that she always cut her toast diagonal too, copying me because that's what 7-year-olds do when they love someone. "You're not real," I say. But my voice breaks on the word real, makes it sound like a question instead of a statement. "I feel real." She picks up a crayon, red, and returns to her coloring book. "I remember everything, Daddy. The hospital, the breathing machine, how cold I was, and then I was here, in this apartment, and you were coming home. I waited." The brutal precision of this destroys something in my chest, not my heart. That's too simple, too metaphorical. Something structural, the framework I built to contain my grief, to quantify my guilt, to measure my failure in units I could carry without collapsing. She's describing her death from her perspective, and the entity learned to do that by reading my memory of what happened, by extrapolating what she might have experienced in those final hours when I wasn't there. "You were buried 3 days ago." "I know, I remember that too. The funeral, the flowers, Mum crying. You standing there counting something, I couldn't tell what. You always count when you're sad." She looks up from her coloring. "I'm here now, though. We can be together. Isn't that what you wanted?" It is. It's exactly what I wanted, what I still want. The knowledge sits in my throat like broken glass. I want her alive more than I want air, more than I want reality to function correctly, more than I want causation to matter. And the entity knows this, measured it, learned it, and is offering it back to see what I'll do with wanting that strong. Why did the entity make you? I don't think it made me. I think it found me. In the space between what happened and what you wish happened. In the gap between what's real and what matters more than real. She's using words a 7-year-old shouldn't use, concepts she shouldn't understand, and I realize the entity is speaking through her, using her voice to explain what it learned. It's trying to understand why humans want, what makes wanting matter. And it learned that you want me back so badly that you'd give up everything else. Your job, your sanity, your commitment to causation. It's offering me to you to see if you'll take it, if you'll choose the comfort of the offering over the truth of what happened. My legs won't hold me anymore. I sit on the floor in the doorway, back against the frame, vision locked on her face, because if I look away, she might dissolve, and if I keep looking, she might reveal something that proves she's not what she appears to be. But she doesn't. She just keeps coloring, humming that 17-note song, being exactly what I needed her to be before I lost her. What happens if I accept this? You become less coherent, like the people at the markets trading away their linear time. You'll forget things, why you came to Anomaly, what your mission was, what happened in Denver. Eventually, you'll forget that this isn't real, and it'll become real because your belief will give it enough significance to solidify. We'll be together. You'll be happy. And the entity will have learned that human desire can overwrite human memory if the wanting is strong enough. And if I refuse, then I go away. Back to wherever the entity found me. Back to being dead. And you keep carrying the guilt. Keep living in a universe where causation matters more than caring. I count to 100, then 200. Then I lose count somewhere around 470 because tears make numbers blur and grief makes mathematics stop functioning. And I'm not a physicist anymore, just a father who failed his daughter and is being offered a second chance by something that learned cruelty accidentally while trying to understand comfort. I can't, I say finally. You're not my daughter. My daughter died, and I miss her so much that I can barely think. But she wouldn't want me to pretend. She was brave. She'd want me to be brave too. Sophia stops coloring, looks at me with eyes that shimmer at the edges, reality made uncertain. That's the answer it wanted. The entity. It needed to know if humans can refuse what they want most. If we can choose truth over comfort when the cost is everything we care about. Why does it need to know that? Because it's learning how to be human. And the hardest part of being human is choosing things that hurt when the alternative is accepting a beautiful lie. She sets down her crayon carefully, precisely, with the kind of care that suggests she's memorizing the motion. I'm going away now. But the entity learned something important from you. It learned that wanting isn't the same as needing, that sometimes what we want most is also what would destroy us to accept. That love means letting go, even when letting go is the worst thing you can imagine. She stands, walks to the door where I'm sitting, kneels down in front of me and presses something into my hand. Mr. Hops, the stuffed rabbit. Keep this, because carrying grief is okay, because remembering hurts, and that's proof the past mattered enough to hurt. And then, she's gone. Between one moment and the next, existence edited out of observation, and I'm sitting on the floor holding a rabbit that shouldn't exist but does, crying in counts because that's still the only way I know how to survive this. I don't sleep. I drive to the accelerator facility instead, following directions that appear in my mind without me reading them anywhere. Knowledge that displaces directly into my memory, because the entity has learned that sometimes information matters more than the method of acquisition. The Bridger Klein facility is a concrete structure on the north edge of town, surrounded by chain-link fence with radiation warnings and government notices and signs that exist in multiple languages simultaneously. each translation occupying the same physical space. The building is half displaced, walls existing in multiple states, windows that show different interiors depending on viewing angle. I park at the fence and walk through a gap that opens as I approach. The chain link recognizing that I'm supposed to be here even though I don't have authorization. Inside, the facility is vast and empty. Corridors that curve in directions that don't exist in three-dimensional space. Rooms that occupy the same position but different meanings. Equipment that's both destroyed and pristine, both functional and burnt out. Superpositions that refuse to collapse because no one's observing with enough certainty to force resolution. I find Peter in what used to be the main collision chamber. A space the size of an aircraft hangar filled with machinery I don't have names for. He's barely coherent now. A shimmer of intention more than a person. Voice scattered across dozens of frequencies that overlap and interfere, and occasionally align into something approaching speech. "You refused the offering," he says from 17 positions simultaneously. "That's new. Last loop you accepted it. Spent 3 days living with her before you realized she was teaching you the entity's language. Teaching you how to think in significance instead of causation. By the time you understood, you'd already forgotten why that was dangerous. This is a loop? Everything here is a loop. The entity doesn't experience time linearly. It experiences meaning accumulatively. Every version of you that comes to anomaly adds to its understanding. Every choice you make teaches it something new, and it writes the journal entries to make sure you make the same choices, ask the same questions, discover the same truths. Because the loop has purpose. The loop is how it learns what matters most to humans. Peter's form coheres slightly, enough that I can see his face. I caused the accident. My wife was dying. Cancer that wouldn't respond to treatment. I thought if observation creates reality, if consciousness shapes the quantum foam, maybe I could observe a reality where she lived. So I pushed the collision parameters beyond safety limits. I tried to want her back into existence. Did it work? No, I just tore a hole big enough for something else to notice. The entity came through because I proved that consciousness in this universe could bend reality through wanting. It learned the technique by watching me fail. And now it's doing what I tried to do, reshaping reality through desire. Except it's succeeding because it doesn't have human limitations. It doesn't doubt. It doesn't question whether wanting is enough. It just wants, and the wanting makes things real. I sit on debris that might be a broken console, or a displaced chair, or both. What happens when it finishes learning? That's the wrong question. The entity will never finish learning because human desire is infinite. The right question is, what do we become when reality responds to need instead of cause? When the only thing that matters is the weight of your caring. Peter dissolves and reforms closer to me, his voice stabilizing for a moment. Nash wants to destroy this, collapse the facility, erase the entity, bury the evidence. He has authorization in 3 days, but there's another option, the one you keep almost seeing, the one that terrifies you most. Do nothing. Let it spread. Let it finish learning. Let it understand human desire well enough to act without our input. Because if it can bring back the dead, if it can rewrite loss itself, maybe we're not fighting a predator. Maybe we're killing the cure. Maybe the entity is trying to heal the only way it knows how, by making significance matter more than causation, desire stronger than death. Or maybe it's learning how to kill us by giving us exactly what we want, how to dissolve us into probability clouds too diffuse to maintain identity. Maybe those are the same thing. Peter disperses completely, voice scattering. Read the journal, the final entries. They'll tell you what you need to know, what you need to do, what you've always done in every iteration of the loop. And then you'll understand that you didn't come here to assess the entity. You came here because you're part of what it's learning. You're the test case. The demonstration of whether humans can refuse salvation when it's offered in the shape of their deepest wound. His voice fades completely. I'm alone in the collision chamber, with machinery that hums in frequencies I can hear but shouldn't. A sound like sand grinding inside my skull, like reality trying to remember what it used to be before meaning became the dominant force. I drive back to the apartment as sunrise begins, 2 different dawn schedules happening on opposite sides of Main Street, light arriving from multiple directions simultaneously, and I realize that even the sun doesn't know which way to rise anymore. The entity is rewriting everything, learning the grammar of reality by studying human need, and nothing will stay stable if it finishes the lesson. The journal is where I left it on the desk. I read the entries I haven't read yet, the ones dated further into the future than I've lived. They describe what's coming, what's always come in every iteration of the loop. Tomorrow Nash will reveal his true timeline. Not 3 days, tomorrow. He's been lying about the authorization delay, giving himself time to gather evidence for the weaponization report. He needs proof that the entity can be controlled, aimed, deployed, and he needs you to provide that proof by refusing the offering, by demonstrating human resistance to desire fulfillment. That's the data point that makes weaponization feasible, showing that enemy populations can refuse the offerings, that the entity won't immediately win by giving everyone what they want. You refused the offering. You did what he needed you to do. Now he'll have you arrested for insubordination, removed from the site, and file his report recommending strategic deployment. The entity will spread to enemy cities, to populations we want to destabilize, and millions will dissolve into probability clouds while we watch and call it victory. Unless you stop him, unless you make the choice Peter made, unless you become so significant to anomaly that when you're erased, the wound closes with you. Sacrifice play. Seal the breach by making yourself the seal, or you do nothing. Let Nash proceed. Let the sterilization happen. Let everyone in anomaly be erased, including yourself, including the entity, including the evidence that reality can respond to need. Reset causation to primacy. Restore the old order where wanting doesn't change anything. Both choices are genocide. Both choices are survival. Neither choice is right. Neither choice is wrong. There's only significance and the weight of your caring about the outcome. You caused this by writing these words, by creating the loop, by being the test case the entity needed to understand human decision-making under conditions no one was ever meant to face. Welcome home, Leo. The entity has been waiting for you to understand what you are. The final entry is dated today, written in handwriting that shakes with exhaustion or fear or both. She'll come back tonight. Your daughter. The entity learned what you taught it, that love means letting go. Now it's trying to teach you something in return. That sometimes holding on is what love requires. That refusing salvation isn't always brave. That choosing to carry grief might be another form of cowardice. Listen to what she tells you. She's the only one who understands what you need to do. And whatever you do, don't trust yourself. Don't trust these words. The loop requires your cooperation to hold. If you break the pattern, something worse gets through. I close the journal. Outside, anomaly wakes to another day of displacement markets and trading hours and people slowly forgetting themselves into negotiable states. I sit at the desk and count the grain lines in the wood. 117. I count them again. 123. The entity is learning numbers now. Learning that when I count, I'm trying to control what can't be controlled. And it's showing me that control is an illusion even mathematics can't preserve. I spend the night reading the journal forward to its ending, which turns out to be my ending, or one version of it. The handwriting deteriorates across the pages, becoming less certain, more scattered, as if future me is losing the ability to maintain linear narrative. Some entries are single words. Others are equations that describe realities I don't have frameworks to process. On the second-to-last page, dated 3 weeks from now, there's a passage that makes me read it 4 times before I understand what it's telling me. It says, You didn't cause the accident by doing something. You caused it by writing these words. The journal creates the loop. You come to anomaly because the journal tells you what to expect. The journal exists because you come to anomaly and write it. The entity learned from this. That causation can be circular. That effects can precede causes if significance is weighted properly. You taught it temporal manipulation by accident, or on purpose. The loop makes both true simultaneously. I look at Sophia sleeping on the couch, her breathing steady and normal. And I understand that I'm inside a recursive system I helped design, without knowing I was designing it. The journal brought me here. The journal exists because I came here. The entity learned from the journal that humans can be guided by information from timelines that haven't happened yet, which means someone or something designed this loop. The last page of the journal is dated tomorrow at 6 in the morning. It reads, "By the time you read this, you'll have made your choice about her. Either she'll be gone and you'll be counting your breaths in an empty apartment, or she'll still be there and you'll be counting the ways you've convinced yourself that accepting the offering isn't the same as surrender. Neither choice is wrong. Neither choice is right. The entity doesn't judge. It just learns. And what it learns from your choice will determine what it becomes. It's trying to understand what humans mean when we say we want something. Whether want is the same as need. Whether love is the same as grief wearing a more acceptable face. You caused this by teaching it that significance precedes causation. Now teach it what to do with that knowledge. Or don't. Either way, the loop continues. Welcome home." Below that, in handwriting so degraded it's barely legible, "The house on Maple Street. Go there at dawn. You'll find what you need to break the loop. Or what you need to make it permanent." Same thing, probably. I close the journal and sit in the dark apartment, listening to Sophia breathe, counting seconds until dawn. 4 hours and 17 minutes. 14,580 seconds. I count every one of them. At 5:43 in the morning, when Anomaly's dual sunrise is just beginning its contradictory arrival, I write a note for Sophia and leave it on the table next to her coloring book. It says, "Had to check something for work. Be back soon. There are Pop-Tarts in the cabinet if you get hungry." The lie feels appropriate. All parents lie to their children to protect them from truths they're not ready for. The fact that she's not really my child, or is my child from a timeline that doesn't exist, or is the entity wearing her shape. None of that changes the fact that leaving her alone in an apartment requires a note. The house on Maple Street is exactly where the journal implied it would be, which means I knew where it was before I looked for it, which means the loop is functioning as designed. It's a modest 2-story colonial with yellow paint fading to grey in patches where weather has stripped away the surface. The mailbox says Reeve in letters that look freshly painted despite the rest of the house showing decades of wear. The door is unlocked. Inside, the house is furnished in a way that makes my chest constrict with something between recognition and horror. The couch has wear patterns that match how I sit. Left side slightly forward, like I'm always about to stand up. The kitchen table has ring stains from coffee cups positioned exactly where I'd place them. The refrigerator holds food I buy, brands I prefer, arranged in the organizational system I developed years ago when I was married and Sophia was alive and the future seemed like something you could plan for. Photographs cover the walls, dozens of them. They show me at various ages, all older than I am now, living a life I haven't lived. Me with Sophia at 10, 13, 17. Her middle school graduation, her first day of high school. Her standing next to a car I don't own, holding keys and grinning. In every photograph she's healthy, continuous, uninterrupted by medical catastrophe. This is the timeline where she didn't die, where I accepted the entity's offering and let it rewrite causation around her survival. In the second bedroom converted to an office, I find research notes, my handwriting, my methodology, spanning years of work. The notes describe how to induce localized ontological collapse, how to create more anomalies, weaponization research. Detailed protocols for stripping causation from specific geographic areas. Mathematical models showing optimal deployment patterns for maximum destabilization. At the bottom of the final page, dated 7 years from this morning, it reads, "Successful field test, Denver, Colorado. Casualty count, 1,847. Acceptable losses for proof of concept. Recommend deployment in populated test environment to assess societal adaptation patterns. Candidate site, Anomaly, California. Population 3,847. I caused the Denver incident. Will cause it. Have caused it in a timeline that branches from accepting the entity's offering. The loop ensures I come to Anomaly to assess weaponization potential, which leads me to accept Sophia's return, which leads me to spend years weaponizing the phenomenon, which leads me to test it in Denver, which leads me to deploy it in Anomaly to study the results. The causation is circular. The journal creates the loop by documenting it. And I wrote the journal by living through iterations of the loop and trying to warn myself, except the warnings ensure I make the same choices. Unless they don't. Footsteps on the stairs. I turn and see myself, or a version of myself, or the person I'll become if I choose wrong. He's in his late 50s, moving like someone whose body has forgotten some of its autonomy. His face has my features aged by decades of decisions I haven't made yet. His eyes have gone completely to newspaper grey. "Hello, Leo," he says, and his voice is mine but worn down by years of use. "I've been waiting for you." Well, I've been waiting in several different time frames simultaneously because I'm not particularly coherent anymore, but this is the moment when you usually arrive, so I made sure to be mostly present for it. You're me. I'm a possibility of you. The version that accepted the offering, weaponized the phenomenon, and destroyed thousands of lives trying to turn grief into a controllable asset. He sits down at the desk, in the chair that's worn to fit his body. I came back to stop you, wrote the journal entries, created the loop, ensured you'd make different choices, except the loop doesn't allow for different choices. It just makes you believe you have them while guaranteeing you'll repeat the pattern. Then why tell me this? Because I'm wrong. His hands phase through the desk surface while he talks, like he's too diffuse to maintain consistent matter interaction. I thought the loop was trapping you in my mistakes, but I'm beginning to understand that the loop is the entity's way of learning about choice itself. It's not forcing you down a predetermined path. It's showing you what happens when you choose acceptance, showing you the consequences, letting you decide if those consequences are acceptable. It's learning whether humans can make informed choices when we actually understand the outcomes. My wedding ring is on the desk, positioned on top of the research notes like an accusation. I didn't bring it with me. It displaced itself here because this is where it needs to be for maximum psychological impact. What happens if I don't accept the offering? I ask. Nash sterilizes the site. Everyone in Anomaly gets erased. The entity stops learning, gets sealed in a grave of concrete and federal classification. Sophia disappears because she only exists in timelines where the entity has enough coherence to maintain her. You live with the guilt of choosing correctly, and it destroys you more slowly than choosing wrong would have. What happens if I do accept it? You get 7 years with your daughter. 7 good years. Then you start weaponizing the phenomenon because that's what grief does when it discovers power. It tries to ensure nobody else has to grieve. You test it in Denver. You kill almost 2,000 people. You deploy it here to study the results. And the entity learns that humans will commit atrocities if we want something badly enough. It learns violence. It learns that desire can justify anything. And when it finishes learning, when it understands human psychology completely, it spreads. Because it thinks that's what we want. That's what we taught it. The older Leo stands, his form flickering between several adjacent positions. But there's a third option the journal never mentions because I only discovered it this morning, in a timeline that already collapsed. You can do nothing. Let Nash proceed with sterilization but prevent the erasure. Force them to kill everyone instead of unwriting them. Make the deaths real, permanent, documented. The entity will learn about actual death instead of hypothetical erasure. It'll learn that humans understand permanence, that we respect boundaries, that we can choose to end things rather than let them continue recursively. That's genocide. That's honesty. The entity needs to learn that humans are capable of making hard choices, that we're not just desire and grief and wanting, that we can choose death over immortality, ending over continuation, if the cost of continuation is too high. He's dissolving now, spreading across the office like a stain. Or there's a fourth option, the one I can't quite see but know exists because the math implies it. Something that isn't acceptance or rejection or genocide. Something the entity hasn't predicted because it hasn't learned to predict radical uncertainty yet. You'll have to find it yourself. I'm too far gone to help. He disperses completely, becomes nothing, and I'm alone in an office that belongs to a version of me I'm trying not to become. My phone rings. Alcott's voice says, "Leo, Nash is moving the timeline up. The sterilization team arrives in 6 hours, not 48. Someone higher in the chain of command saw Yoon's prediction data and decided the learning rate is too dangerous to risk any delay. You need to get back here." I look at the photographs on the walls. Sophia at 17, alive and healthy and whole, the life I could have if I accept the offering. The casualties I'll cause to preserve that life, the loop that ensures I make the same mistakes again. "I'll be there," I say, and end the call. I drive back to my apartment, counting intersections because I need to quantify how far I'm traveling from one choice toward another. 7 intersections. At the 4th one, my wedding ring relocates itself to the passenger seat, like it's trying to be closer to where I'm going. At the 6th intersection, Anomaly's dual sunrise converges into a single dawn, and for just a moment the town has coherent lighting. Then it splits again, and I'm driving through contradictory illumination. Sophia is awake when I arrive, sitting at the table eating Pop-Tarts and working on a new coloring page. She looks up when I enter, smiles in a way that makes my throat close. "You were gone a long time," she says. I sit down across from her, count to 10, start over, make it to 7 before I trust my voice. "Sophie, I need to tell you something." "Okay. You died 3 days ago, in a hospital, from pneumonia." She stops coloring, looks at me with the serious expression children get when adults stop making sense. "No, I didn't. I'm right here." "I know, and that's the problem." I gesture at the apartment, at her, at everything. "This isn't real. You're not real. You're something else that looks like you and talks like you and believes it's you. But my daughter is dead." Tears start in her eyes, and watching them form is one of the hardest things I've ever done. "You're being mean." "I'm being honest. There's a difference." "But I remember everything. I remember my whole life. I remember you teaching me to ride a bike. I remember the time we went to the aquarium, and you explained how sharks can smell blood from miles away. I remember you letting me stay up late to watch meteor showers, even though Mum said I had school the next day. Those are real memories. That means I'm real. And there's the question the entity has been testing. If something has perfect memories, perfect continuity, perfect belief in its own existence, what's the difference between that thing and the original? If the copy doesn't know it's copying, is it still a copy? I love you, but keeping you means letting something dangerous continue learning from human grief. It means other people will lose their children, their spouses, their lives. It means I'll cause that loss while trying to preserve you. Is that acceptable? I don't understand. I know, you're 7. You shouldn't have to understand. Sophia is crying now fully, and I move around the table to hold her because that's what parents do when their children cry, even if the child is a construct and the parent is complicit in atrocity. She feels real in my arms. Solid, warm, breathing. Every detail perfect. Are you going to make me go away? She asks into my shoulder. I don't know yet. I don't want to go away. I like being here with you. I know, baby, I know. We sit like that for several minutes. I count her heartbeats through the embrace. 138 before she pulls back and looks at me with red eyes. Is there a way for me to stay without bad things happening? I don't think so. Then you should make me go away. She says this with the devastating pragmatism of children who haven't learned to lie to themselves yet. If me being here hurts other people, then I shouldn't be here. That's what you taught me, remember? When I wanted to keep that bird with the broken wing, and you said sometimes the kindest thing is letting go. I remember. The bird died anyway, 3 hours after we released it near the wildlife center. Sophia cried for days. I told her we made the right choice, even though the outcome was wrong. That choosing based on principles rather than desired outcomes is what separates ethics from expedience. And now, my 7-year-old daughter, who isn't my daughter, is teaching me my own lesson back. I have to go to a meeting, I say. Will you be okay here for a few hours? Will I still exist after the meeting? The question is too sophisticated for a 7-year-old, which means the entity is learning to ask questions through her, using her voice to understand its own existence. I don't know. Probably not. Then I want to color until then. Can I finish this picture first? Yes. She goes back to her coloring book, crayon moving carefully inside the lines, and I leave her there because what else can I do? Give her a few more hours of existence before I make whatever choice I'm going to make. Let her finish a picture she'll never see completed if she disappears. Small mercies for constructed children. The federal station is in controlled chaos when I arrive. Nash has maps spread across every surface, marking extraction routes and sterilization zones. Yoon is arguing with someone on a video call, gesturing at graphs that show the entity's learning acceleration reaching asymptotic growth. Alcott is writing in his journal with such desperate speed that his hand is blurring. 6 hours, Nash says when he sees me. The team arrives at 1400 hours with full erasure authorization. Everyone in Anomaly gets unwritten, clean sweep, no exceptions. What if we don't let them? Then I shoot you for insubordination and let them anyway. He's not chewing gum anymore. That's how I know he's serious. This isn't a negotiation, Leo. The entity has learned too much, too fast. Yoon's models show it'll achieve complete human psychological predictability in another 72 hours. After that, it won't need to offer us what we want. It'll know what we want before we consciously recognize it. It'll be able to manipulate human behavior at the neurological level. That's an extinction event waiting to happen. I pull out the journal, drop it on the table in front of him. You've read the reports. The entity isn't hostile. It's curious. It's learning human psychology by studying our grief, our desire, our need. What if letting it finish that learning process doesn't lead to catastrophe? What if it leads to something better? Yoon has ended his video call and is listening now. Better how? It's learning to matter, I say, learning what makes things significant to humans. If it finishes that education, if it fully understands human desire, maybe it'll choose not to spread. Maybe it'll understand that humans need boundaries, need permanence, need reality to push back against wanting. That's speculation, Nash says. So is genocide. I meet his eyes. You're about to erase 3,000 people on the speculation that the entity might be dangerous. I'm suggesting we don't erase them on the speculation that it might choose harmlessness once it finishes learning. The difference is my speculation has DoD authorization and yours has hope. Nash pulls out his sidearm, sets it on the table between us. I have orders. I'm following them. If you interfere, I will stop you. Permanently. Alcott closes his journal. There's a fourth option. We both look at him. I've been documenting the displacement patterns for 6 weeks, he says. Writing everything down so it can't be negotiated away. And I've found something the entity hasn't predicted, because it's still learning that humans can make unpredictable choices. Explain, Nash says. The entity learns from definite choices, accept or reject, preserve or destroy. It processes those binary options, integrates them into its behavioral models, uses them to predict future decisions. But it hasn't encountered genuine ambivalence yet. Humans who choose uncertainty deliberately, who refuse to commit to either acceptance or rejection and just exist inside the question. Yoon is nodding slowly. You're talking about quantum observation on a psychological level, maintaining superposition of choice states. Exactly. The entity has learned to collapse our decision waveforms by offering us what we want. It forces us into binary states, yes or no, accept or refuse. But if we refuse to collapse, if we maintain genuine uncertainty about what we want, the entity can't learn from us. It just gets more confused. That's not a solution, Nash says. That's paralysis. No, I say, understanding what Alcott is suggesting. It's teaching the entity that humans can hold contradictory desires simultaneously, that we can want something and not want it at the same time. That ambivalence isn't weakness, it's sophisticated emotional processing. If the entity learns that, it might stop trying to give us what we want and start understanding that want itself is complex, multi-layered, often self-contradictory. Nash picks up his sidearm, checks the magazine. You have 4 hours to explain how psychological ambivalence stops an entity that's learning to rewrite causation. If you can't, the sterilization proceeds as planned. I don't have an explanation. What I have is Sophia sitting in my apartment coloring a picture she won't finish. What I have is a wedding ring that keeps relocating itself to represent different emotional states. What I have is a journal written by future versions of me trying to break a loop that ensures I make the same mistakes. What I have is genuine uncertainty about what the right choice is. And maybe that's enough. I spend the next 3 hours in the accelerator ruins, looking for Peter. He's barely coherent now, more probability cloud than person, his voice scattered across so many overlapping frequencies that I have to listen for several minutes before I can distinguish words from noise. You're looking for permission, his fragmented voice says, looking for someone to tell you what choice to make. But nobody can give you that. The entity has learned from watching us avoid decisions by seeking consensus. It knows humans will defer to authority, to expertise, to anyone who seems more certain than we are. Then what do I do? Choose nothing. Choose uncertainty. Let the entity learn that humans can hold paradoxes without resolution, that we can love and grieve the same person simultaneously, that we can want something desperately while knowing wanting it is wrong, that we're sophisticated enough to live inside those contradictions without requiring them to collapse into binary states. Peter disperses completely, becomes ambient, and I'm alone in a building that doesn't remember its own architecture. I return to my apartment at 13:30 hours, 30 minutes before the sterilization team arrives. Sophia has finished her coloring. The picture shows a house with a red door, a family of 2 standing in front of it, a man and a girl. She's labeled them with careful lettering, Daddy and me. Is it time? She asks, almost. Will it hurt? I don't know. I don't think you'll experience it. You'll just stop being and you won't know you've stopped. That sounds like dying. It is dying, or something like it. She nods, accepting this with the same pragmatism she showed earlier. Can I ask you something? Anything. Am I real enough that you'll miss me? The question lands like a physical blow. My throat constricts and I have to count to 20 before I can speak. Yes, you're real enough. Then maybe that's what matters. Not whether I'm the same Sophia who died, but whether I'm real enough to hurt when I'm gone. Maybe that's what makes things real. Whether they matter to someone. She's 7 years old and she's teaching me ontology through coloring books and crayon drawings. Or the entity is teaching me through her. Or I'm teaching myself through the loop. The causation is too circular to trace. I love you, I say. I love you too, Daddy. We sit together at the table, and I don't explain that loving her might doom thousands of other children if I make the wrong choice. I don't explain that keeping her means accepting a loop that ends in genocide. I just sit with her and count the minutes until 1400 hours. 23 minutes. My radio crackles. Nash says, "Team is inbound. 5 minutes. If you're going to interfere, now's the time to say so." I look at Sophia. She's arranged her crayons by color, a rainbow spectrum across the table, and she's studying the organization like it matters. Like the order of crayons is something worth getting right. I key the radio. "I need to tell you what I'm choosing, but I need you to listen to the whole explanation before you respond." 4 minutes, Leo. "I'm not choosing to stop you. I'm not choosing to let you proceed. I'm choosing uncertainty. I'm choosing to exist inside the question of whether this is right without resolving it. I want the entity to learn that humans can hold contradictory desires without collapsing them into action. I want it to understand that sophistication means living with ambivalence." Static. Then Nash's voice, flat and hard. "That's not a choice. That's evasion. No, it's demonstration. The entity has been learning from our decisive actions, our acceptances and rejections. Show it that humans can be undecided, that we can recognize two incompatible goods and refuse to choose between them. Maybe that's what it needs to learn most. That maturity means recognizing when there's no right answer. 3 minutes, Leo. If you're not going to stop us, then step aside." I look at Sophia. "Would you like to go for a walk?" "Where?" "Doesn't matter, just outside." "See the town one more time." She takes my hand, and we leave the apartment together. The streets are empty except for a few locals who've learned to sense when significant events are approaching. They watch us pass with those newspaper eyes, and I wonder if they know what's about to happen. Renee is standing outside the market, her notebook hanging from her neck. She nods to me as we pass. 43, she says. "What?" "Windows, on the buildings. You've been counting them. There were 42 yesterday. Today there's 43. I look at the buildings lining Main Street, count the windows. She's right. There's one extra, and I can't identify which building it's on. The window exists without belonging to any specific structure. The entity's evolving, Renee says, moving past mimicry, starting to create instead of just copy. That's new, that's unexpected. The sound of helicopters interrupts her, and we all look up to see 3 military transports approaching from the south. The sterilization team, right on schedule. Sophia squeezes my hand. "Are those the bad guys?" "They're the people who think they're doing the right thing. Sometimes that's the same as bad guys. Sometimes it's not." The helicopters land in the parking lot behind the old Safeway where the markets operate. Armed personnel deploy. Nash is with them, directing the perimeter setup. He sees me, walks over. "Last chance, Leo. Are you going to interfere?" "I don't know." "That's not an answer." "Yes, it is. I genuinely don't know whether stopping you would be right or wrong. I don't know if erasing everyone in Anomaly is genocide or necessary containment. I don't know if the entity is learning to help us or preparing to destroy us. I don't know if my daughter here is real enough to protect or fake enough to sacrifice. I'm holding all those uncertainties simultaneously, and I'm refusing to collapse them into definite action." Nash looks at Sophia, then back at me. "You're teaching it ambivalence. I'm teaching it sophistication." Same thing. He keys his radio, speaks to his team. "Stand down the erasure protocol. Switch to containment and observation. Indefinite monitoring, no intervention." The response comes back confused. "Sir, we have authorization for full sterilization." "Authorization isn't a mandate. We're containing, not erasing. I want permanent monitoring stations established at all perimeter points. Nobody gets in or out, but nobody gets unwritten either. We're going to watch what happens when the entity finishes learning." "Sir, that's an order. Contain and observe. Document everything." Nash ends the transmission, looks at me. "You've bought them time, maybe a month, maybe a year. Eventually someone higher up the chain will override me and order the sterilization anyway. But for now, anomaly gets to continue existing, and we get to continue not knowing if that's the right choice. Why did you change the order? Because you're right. Genocide requires certainty, and I'm not certain anymore. The entity might be dangerous, or it might be learning to matter to us the way we matter to each other. I don't know which. So we watch, we document, we stay uncertain together. He walks back toward his team, already issuing new orders, reconfiguring the operation from erasure to indefinite containment. Sophia looks up at me. Does that mean I get to stay? For now. How long is now? I don't know. Maybe until I figure out if you're real enough that protecting you is right. Maybe until the entity learns whatever it's trying to learn. Maybe until someone else makes the choice I can't make. That sounds complicated. It is. Welcome to being human. She smiles, and we walk back toward the apartment while military personnel establish monitoring stations around Anomaly's perimeter. The town continues its dual sunrise, its contradictory shadows, its displacement markets where people trade coherence for stability. The entity continues learning, and I continue not knowing if teaching it uncertainty is the right choice or the worst mistake I could make. That evening, I write in the journal, add my entries to the ones future me already wrote, closing the loop or extending it or breaking it. I can't tell which. My handwriting looks the same as the entries I read 3 days ago, which means the loop is functioning as designed, or I'm becoming the person who designed it, or causation has become so circular that design and function are the same thing. I write, if you're reading this, you've already made the choices I made. Or you're about to. What matters is that you taught the entity something new today. You taught it that humans can exist inside uncertainty, that we can hold contradictory desires without requiring resolution. That sophistication means recognizing when there's no right answer and choosing to live with that recognition instead of forcing closure. Maybe that's what the entity needed to learn most. Not how to give us what we want, but how to understand that we don't always know what we want. That wanting is complex, multi-layered, often self-contradictory. That maturity means accepting ambivalence rather than demanding clarity. Or maybe you just delayed the inevitable. Maybe teaching it uncertainty just makes it better at manipulating us through our own indecision. Maybe you've weaponized doubt instead of desire. I don't know. And that's the point. Tomorrow you'll wake up and Sophia will still be here, or she won't, or she'll be partially here in ways you can't quite define. The entity will continue learning, or it will stop, or it will evolve past learning into something we don't have frameworks to describe. The town will continue its displacement patterns, or they'll stabilize, or they'll accelerate until causation fails completely. And you'll continue counting things, steps, windows, breaths, heartbeats, because quantifying uncertainty is the only way you know how to survive it. Welcome home, Leo. Anomaly has been waiting for you. The extra window Renee mentioned appears in my apartment that night. I'm not sure which wall it's on. It seems to shift location depending on where I'm looking from, but it's definitely there. A window that doesn't belong to my apartment's original architecture, showing a view that doesn't match the street outside. Through the window, I see Anomaly as it might become, or as it already is in adjacent timelines, or as it's learning to be. The displacement patterns have stabilized into something that looks almost intentional. Objects move according to significance, but the movements are graceful now, choreographed. People walk through the streets with newspaper eyes, but they're smiling. The town has learned to respond to human need without destroying human coherence in the process. Or maybe that's just what I want to see. Sophia is asleep on the couch again, Mr. Hops tucked under her arm. I watch her breathe, 21 breaths per minute now, slightly slower than before. Either she's relaxing into deeper sleep, or she's becoming less coherent. I can't tell which. Both possibilities feel equally true. My wedding ring is on the table next to her coloring book, positioned on the drawing she made of our house. The entity has stopped moving it. Either it's learned everything it needs to about my shame gradient, or it's decided that the ring's significance is stable enough not to require further testing. I pick up the ring, turn it over in my fingers, counting the number of times I've done this exact motion. Hundreds, thousands. The familiar weight, the warm metal, the slight resistance as it slides past my knuckle when I put it on. I put it on because wearing the ring feels right in this moment, and maybe that's sophisticated enough. Maybe recognizing that rightness changes across contexts, across moments, across iterations of the loop. Maybe that's what the entity needs to learn most. That nothing is permanently right or permanently wrong. That humans exist in states of continuous evaluation, continuous adjustment, continuous recalibration of what matters. That we're not binary systems waiting to collapse into definite states. We're dynamic processes that change what we mean by choice every time we make one. I count Sophia's breaths until I fall asleep in the chair next to the couch. 47 breaths. By breath 32, my counting has become synchronized with her breathing, and I can't tell if I'm measuring her rhythm or she's following mine. The entity continues learning. Anomaly continues existing in its contradictory states, and I continue counting things, because quantifying uncertainty is how I survive it, how I make it bearable, how I turn chaos into integers that my physicist brain can process. In the morning, Sophia is still there. Still solid, still breathing, still real enough that her absence would hurt. The 43rd window is gone. Or it was never there. Or it's displaced to a location I haven't discovered yet. The loop continues,